So I bought this leaf blower using my favorite app to find equipment for sale, and I think I got a great deal. Now the ad for it said it won't start and it's only for parts, which could either mean they tried to fix it and couldn't get it to work, or they knew what they were doing but come to find out the engine was simply too far gone to make it work. Hopefully we won't come to the same conclusion, otherwise this project just got more complicated. In today's video, we're going to be looking at this leaf blower, and the problem is that it won't start and run, at least according to the ad. But in a different video, we did try and start the blower and it does run for a second, but that's after we put fuel into the carb. However, we never tried starting it the way you're supposed to do it by purging it and choking the carb, so we'll try that today. But as usual, we'll want to record the information from the stickers just in case we need to order parts for it. One good reason for a blower not to start is bad fuel, but we'll leave what's in there for now and worry about it later on. However, our plans to try and start it stop right here. That's because if the purge bulb will not pull fuel from the tank and put it into the carb, it's probably not going to start. Yes, you could pull on the rope until the carb is able to pull fuel from the tank, but I'd rather save my shoulder and also avoid the frustration. I'm also going to quickly wash away the majority of the dirt and oil off the blower before we work on it. This is not necessary, but I like the idea of working on a machine without the risk of contaminating the carb or the engine. Now my schedule is a bit full right now, and I really don't have the hour to wait for the water to dry off naturally, so I'll help and speed it up. Nothing wrong with using a working leaf blower to dry off a wet one, but compressed air will work too, and it still beats waiting for it to dry off. Once the blower is mostly dried off, we'll start by draining that questionable fuel from the tank, and what we find is quite surprising. If you didn't know it, the fuel that came out of it is much too dark, meaning it is stale and the engine was never going to be able to run on it. So here's something really strange. This is the grounding wire for the handle, but it's fallen off the handle and is hung up in the housing. The only way this can happen is if someone was working on this blower before and wasn't careful when putting the blower back together again. And if you didn't notice it, but the air filter was brand new, I think the person who sold me the blower may have worked on it but was unable to get it going. And if you needed more proof, these are new fuel lines. However, these are not connected the right way, so don't pay any attention to the way they're connected. We'll then disconnect them from the bulb, then pop out the purge bulb, and then try to get to the carb for an inspection. There is one problem though. We can't take out the carb because the throttle linkage is still connected, and to disconnect it, we'll need to take off this cover. Now you don't need to take off the blower tube, but I'm going to, so it won't be in my way while filming. Now to begin, we'll take off the recoil, then follow it up with several screws near the handle. But the surprises just keep coming because it turns out they lost one of the bolts and just put some random one in its place. Unfortunately, the thread count is just a bit off from what it should be and we'll have to fix it, but not right now. Just be aware that the cover for the muffler is held in place by the cover we need to take off. And after taking the cover off the engine, we can now get to that grounding wire and put it back in its place, but be careful, it will fall off again. You can put it back on later if you want to, but there's a really good chance that you might forget to replace it, so I do it now. We'll then disconnect the linkage from the carb by taking the trigger off its post. And with that done, we then slide the carb off the studs and then disconnect the remaining fuel lines. So next up, we're going to take the plate off of the pumping diaphragm and see what kind of condition the diaphragm is in. But what we find is not good. Turns out the previous owner didn't mind putting dirt inside the carb and the dirt imprinted on it. Yes, it is still usable because the flaps are still good, but this is not ideal. We'll then inspect the round inlet screen for any debris and, well, we don't have to look too hard to see it. This is what happens when the fuel filter is not connected to the fuel line and the carb is pulling in unfiltered fuel. So they may have replaced the fuel lines and fuel filter, however, they may not have realized the screen was going to do the filter's job. So this is the metering diaphragm and its job is to control fuel flow through the carb. But to do that, it needs to be soft, which this one is, but it's also quite deformed, which might affect how it works. But what if yours is beginning to harden up? Well, the good news is that you can save it. But the bad news is that it won't last forever, but it should last long enough to get you through the season. So next up, we'll take out the needle and rocker arm, that way we can give it a decent cleaning. So what I think happened was that the person before me tried to fix it. However, they tried the best they could, but there were so many details that got past them and it didn't go according to plan. Now this can happen to anyone. Even the most experienced person can miss something and end up with bad results. Just be very careful when spraying down the carb, not to push dirt into places where you don't want it to go. Also, make sure that your cleaner can pass through the screen, but if it can't, then keep cleaning it until it does. And since the cleaner is passing through this screen, we'll then move on to the pumping section, then start to put the carb back together again. This is when things can get a little tricky, and that's because these tiny parts can be a real pain to handle. And if you do end up dropping them, it could mean you're going to have to spend some time close to the floor trying to find them. But if you want to avoid this headache, my recommendation would be to just replace the carb, but you'll have to make that choice. Once the needle and rocker arm are back in the carb, press on it to make sure it's working as it should be. But if it's not working like it should, you know what you have to do, so hopefully you get it right the first time. We'll then replace the pumping diaphragm and its plate, then tighten down the bolts. I forgot to mention it, but all the bolts on the carb weren't even tight, so even if fuel got to it, it would have leaked all over the place. Now you don't want to over tighten these bolts, but just make sure they're not loose either. So next up, we're going to replace that old diaphragm with a new one, just make sure the gasket goes on first. So I have been asked if all the metering diaphragms are the same, and the answer is no. The differences are the size of the stem in the middle and the number of openings around the edge. Before putting the carb back on, I looked in the fuel tank and realized the filter was not in a good location. It's too far back in the tank and should be closer to the front, which is where the fuel will be when the blower is pointed down. Luckily, there's plenty of fuel line, and all we need to do is turn the filter to change its location. After that, we won't be able to see it through the opening anymore because its location is now at the front. So this port at the bottom is where the fuel filter line is supposed to connect to it, and since there's too much line, we'll just cut it down to length. Don't forget this gasket that sits between the carb and the engine, because without it, the carb will not work like it's supposed to. We'll then place the carb close to the engine so we can connect the fuel filter line and then slide the carb onto the studs. We'll then route the fuel return line clear of the carb, otherwise it could get pinched between it and the airbox. And once the carb is finally in place, we'll then connect the linkage for the trigger and then put it back on its post. Also, don't forget to test it out, otherwise you'll have to take the cover back off to fix it. Next, we're going to put this short piece of fuel line on the top port, and this will lead back to the purge bulb. We'll then gather up that long fuel return line from the tank and place them in the opening for the bulb. We'll then carefully position the airbox so the blue choke lever passes through it, and then we'll push it into place. It's very unfortunate, but this does take quite a bit of coordination, not to mention even more patience. And once it's in place, we'll then install the nuts and then deal with the purge bulb. So there are two ports in the bulb, and the longer one will connect to the fuel return line going back to the tank, while the shorter one will connect to that short fuel line that's connected to the top port on the carb. Now don't worry, we're going to do a flow test here in a minute once the fuel lines are connected and the bulb is back in its place. I'll then pour in some fresh fuel that I mixed using 100% gasoline and a decent 2-stroke oil that's been stabilized. So when pressing on the bulb, fuel will come up the filter line, enter the carb, leave through that short fuel line, fill the bulb, and then go back to the fuel tank. And as you can see, the bulb is filling with fuel and it's going in the right direction. But if yours is not filling with fuel, then the carb or even the fuel filter might be the problem. Now while we have access to the muffler, I like to inspect the spark arrestor screen. I want to make sure the screen is not clogged with any carbon, but as you can tell, it's not clogged at all. We'll put this one back in the muffler, but if yours is clogged, you'll need to clean it, otherwise it'll affect how the engine runs. I would also recommend that you keep the screen in place and not throw it away, but it is your machine and you are welcome to do what you want with it. After the cover is mostly back together, check and make sure that the thumb lever is working like it should be. I do want to point out that there were so many minor and major problems with this machine, but all of them could have been avoided. I would recommend that you take pictures and stay organized when working on these, and also be very patient. Because if you rush a project like this one, you too might end up making all the mistakes that were made on this one. Once the blower tube is back on, we'll then put the air filter and its cover back on, then we'll try and start it. So it starts and runs now, and it's not bad at all. I might try and adjust the carb later on, but not right now. and instead we'll start it back up after it cools down just to make sure it's reliable, which I've heard is quite important. But overall, this is a fantastic blower. We just need to fix that knob for the air box, but that shouldn't be too difficult at all. So my question is, would you buy this blower if the price was reasonable, or do you prefer a different brand? Orange is a great color for equipment, but some might say the other shade is even better. Thank you for watching. I really do appreciate your time here. Please feel free to ask me any questions about this project or about your own projects, and I hope to see you in the next video.